Hey, folks, welcome to a live episode of the Law of Self-Defense. So glad you could all be here. I am, of course, attorney Andrew Branca for the Law of Self-Defense, and we have some interesting news. The Daniel Penny trial in New York City today was day one. Of course, Daniel Penny's on trial for reckless manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide in the death of Jordan Neely. Jordan Neely was a apparently deranged, mentally ill drug addict on a New York City subway, a crowded subway car, threatening to kill people, not being afraid to go to jail for the rest of his life. People were terrified of this lunatic on the train. And Daniel Penny, had been a Marine, decided he would intervene. He took Jordan Neely down to the floor of the subway car, held him there so he couldn't hurt anybody until police arrived. Police arrived and they took Jordan Neely to the hospital, and he was declared dead at the hospital. And the George Soros funded prosecutor Alvin Bragg in New York City decided to charge Daniel Penny with killing charges: reckless manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, and he's on trial for those today. Opening statements was today, and we had some interesting reveals today. For the first time ever revealed to the public, we have body-worn camera of police officers responding to the scene, providing care to Jordan Neely, and multiple police officers. Of course, this is obviously after whatever choking happened is over. Daniel Penny's no longer touching Jordan Neely. The police are there. And in this video footage, you can see multiple police officers checking for a pulse on Jordan Neely multiple times. And guess what? They all find a pulse. Every single one of them finds a pulse on Jordan Neely, which means Jordan Neely was not deceased when he was in the hands of Daniel Penny. Daniel Penny did not choke him to death. If you're choking someone and you choke them to death, they don't come back to life. So Jordan Neely was still alive when the police got to him. In fact, he was so alive that the police gave him Narcan. Just based on observation, they could tell he was a drug addict. You don't give Narcan to dead people, folks. If someone died of their overdose, Narcan cannot help them. It does not bring them back to life. Narcan is what you give to people experiencing an overdose to neutralize the effects of the opioids they're on. But if those opioids have already killed them, there is no resurrection. So all the evidence sourced to the police, their conduct, their demeanor, their observations, their testimony, is that Jordan Neely was alive when they got there, not killed by Daniel Penny. So I don't expect this to be a long show. I have video of the body-worn camera footage I want to share with you so you can hear it for yourself. I have a little Daily Mail, a UK newspaper, of course, is providing the best coverage of this. Not perfect coverage, but the best coverage. Remember that what Daniel Penny will be arguing in court in his defense is that this was an unforeseeable death. He did nothing that should have caused a normal, healthy person to expire. He used the minimal amount of force necessary to protect himself and the other subway car passengers from this deranged, drug-addicted lunatic, Jordan Neely. He didn't choke him for 5 minutes. He restrained him until police got there. To the extent he choked him, he would stop the choke when Jordan Neely stopped resisting. So the control. Nobody was more shocked than Daniel Penny when Jordan Neely would later expire. And this is fundamentally a legal defense of self-defense and defense of others, which means the state of New York has to disprove that defense beyond any reasonable doubt. Meaning, if there's an alternative hypothesis for the death of Jordan Neely, consistent with Daniel Penny's innocence, well, he's presumed innocent. That is reasonable doubt. There is a reasonable alternative hypothesis for how this long-term drug-addicted lunatic expired, other than the lunatic notion that Daniel Penny on the floor of that subway car choked somebody for 5 minutes. Try choking a pillow for 5 minutes to see what that feels like. It's patently ridiculous. But let's jump right into the body-worn camera first. Now, this does come with a warning label on it. I don't know why, because no one's being injured here. This is just several police officers standing around providing care to Jordan Neely. He is alive. We're not looking at a dead person here. But nevertheless, the Daily Mail put a warning label on it here. I'll shrink myself a little more. It's not long. It's only about a minute and a half long. But I want you to listen for how many officers, how many times, how many locations on Jordan Neely's body they declare that they found a pulse and that he's breathing. Ready? Here we go.
Here we go. Pulse?
You got a pulse?
You got a pulse or no?
I feel a pulse.
You feel a pulse? Keep breathing, right?
Try it on the wrist. Try it on the wrist. This one.
You got a pulse. You got a pulse. You breathing?
I feel like.
Nah, I feel the pulse. You got a pulse. You got a
Yo,
pulse.
I'm at.
He put him on the pulse.
Stay with me.
He's breathing. Relax. Get off the train. How about you get off the train?
Just breathe
Yo, my man.
Yo.
They're trying to wake him up. He's got a pulse. That's 10.
No.
11, 12.
I think somebody bystander took him out possibly.
So, at least 12 times, multiple officers, multiple locations on Neely's body report that he's got a pulse, he's breathing. They're trying to shake him to consciousness. You don't do that with a dead person. Dead people don't come to consciousness. They gave him Narcan. You don't do that with dead people. Narcan cannot resurrect a dead person. So let's look at the text of the Daily Mail here. The state tried to make hay out of the fact that these officers, well, why didn't you give him CPR then? Well, first of all, he's breathing. You don't give CPR to someone who's breathing. Second of all, he's disgusting. He's a homeless drug addict. None of these officers are going to put their lips on his mouth. You know what happens when you give CPR to people? So, full disclosure, I used to work on an ambulance crew decades ago. Our expectation was if we gave CPR to someone who was not breathing and successfully got them breathing, they vomited. That was expected. Today, we have these breathing apparatus you can put over their mouth, so hopefully the vomit doesn't get into your mouth. Nice, huh? But of course, today we have widespread hepatitis, we have AIDS, we have all kinds of nasty stuff. None of these guys want to bring back to their families, much less suffer themselves. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at what the Daily Mail has to say here. Sorry for all the ads, folks. There's nothing I can do about that. Headline is breaking news, Daniel Penny trial bombshell. Bombshell. You know who knew this the whole time? From day one? Alvin Bragg knew this. He had this body-worn camera footage. It's only bombshell for us because George Soros-funded prosecutor Alvin Bragg withheld this from the public. We heard rumors about this. Some of the cops must have leaked, but we didn't have evidence. And the evidence could not be more clear. Breaking news, Daniel Penny trial bombshell. Homeless man still had a pulse and was breathing after chokehold that prosecutors say killed him. That's weird, right? You choke someone to death, you let go, the cops put hands on, and now the guy is suddenly resurrected. Color me skeptical. Police detected a pulse on homeless man Jordan Neely after he was put in a chokehold by Marine veteran Daniel Penny. Bombshell, new. Bodycam footage reveals. Is this bodycam footage new? It's not new. It was created in the moment. The police and the prosecutor, the investigators, they all had this right then, in that moment. The video became public today, the Daily Mail continues, as Penny's manslaughter trial began in Manhattan. Penny, then 24. Imagine he gets sentenced to 15, 20 years in prison over this. Is accused of killing Neely by putting him in what prosecutors say was a fatal chokehold. It's weird how he killed him when he was still alive, after there was no longer any chokehold. The May 1st, 2023 incident sparked uproar in America. Black Lives Matters says it was the racist killing of a mentally ill black man by an overzealous white military faithful, whatever a white military faithful is. I've never heard that phrase before. Others say Penny is a hero, a modern-day Batman who stepped in when Neely made aggressive threats on the subway, including to a toddler boy whose mother shielded him with a stroller. Well, we know that's true because we've heard evidence about that. All those people, hopefully, God willing, will testify. During opening statements today, body cam footage of the moments cops found Neely was shown. That's what we just watched. NYPD officers arrived on the train at Fulton Station at 2:33 p.m. 2 officers confirmed that Neely still had a pulse, actually 3, at least 3. When they arrived, I got a pulse, one said. A second officer confirmed that he too felt a pulse. Neely was unconscious, lying on the subway car floor. When asked how Neely ended up there, Penny replied, "I put him out." Despite initially detecting a pulse, they issued Narcan. Now, I don't understand this phrase. Despite detecting a pulse, they issued Narcan. You know who you do not give Narcan to? People without a pulse. You only give Narcan to people with a pulse. Narcan cannot revive dead people. They issued Narcan, the drug used to reverse opiate overdoses, and started CPR at 2:38. Paramedics from Northwell Health arrived. Well, they didn't give him CPR. I mean, they testified why they didn't give him CPR. We'll get to that in a moment. Paramedics from Northwest Health arrived at the train at 2:48, 15 minutes after the police. They may have put him on one of those automatic chest compression machines, a CPR machine, instead of doing it themselves. That's the standard practice now. There's no harm in putting that device on a dead person. You're not going to hurt him more. At 3:13 p.m., almost 45 minutes after police first arrived, Neely was still on the train, by then surrounded by paramedics. You think they spent 45 minutes giving CPR to a dead person? Does anybody believe that? While he's still on the train? The body cam released by the court today ends there. Some pictures. Neely was not pronounced dead until he arrived at Lenox Health Hospital in Greenwich Village later that afternoon. Among witnesses on the first day of evidence was an NYPD sergeant who testified that none of his team performed mouth-to-mouth on Neely. Why? Because he was a drug user. He seemed to be a drug user. He was an apparent drug user. He was very dirty. I didn't want to get ... hepatitis. He probably said effing hepatitis. If he did wake up, he would have been vomiting. I don't want my officers to do that. He was filthy. He looked like a homeless individual. You have to protect your officer. I wouldn't want my officer to get sick if the person throws up. This what they're describing is what Daniel Penny was willing to take to the ground against his own body on a filthy New York City subway car floor to protect his fellow New Yorkers. Of course, We see this all the time in prosecutions when they don't have the facts and the law to convict someone on the merits. What do? They get histrionic. They get theatrical. They go for the emotions. In opening statements, Manhattan prosecutors said Jordan Neely took his last breaths on the dirty floor of an uptown F train. Well, none of that is Daniel Penny. Daniel Penny's not responsible for cleaning the floors. He was 30 years old, homeless, mentally ill. Who's responsible for that? Describing Daniel Penny, Assistant District Attorney, let's see, Daphne Uran said, quote, Daniel Penny quite literally went for the jugular. The carotids, actually, if there was a choke at all. The prosecution accepted that Neely had been menacing passengers on the train. Well, that's nice of them to accept that. That was the overwhelming testimony from the other passengers on the train. But the prosecutor said the entire exchange, from the time Neely got on the train to the time the doors opened at the next station, lasted just 30 seconds. It was Penny's choice to keep Neely restrained, not choked, restrained, for a further 5 minutes and 53 seconds that formed the basis of the state's case. The prosecutor said, quote, he quite literally went immediately for the jugular. She said, we pass people like Jordan Neely every day. As New Yorkers, we train ourselves to not engage, not to make eye contact, to pretend people like Jordan Neely don't exist. You know what these people sound like? They sound like people who've been occupied by a foreign army. Duran told jurors that another man who helped to get Neely to the ground repeatedly told Penny that he could let go because he had a strong grip on his arms. The defendant had specialized training in chokeholds. I doubt he had much. We're supposed to believe that the Marine Corps are training their men to a black belt level of choke technique. That's just not true. A person passes out and you have to immediately let go. A green belt Marine, whatever that is taught and clearly knows. Well, there's no evidence that he didn't let go in the sense of stopping the choke. You can have your arm around someone's neck like in a seatbelt manner and not be choking them at all. He pushed Neely to the point of no return, certain to die. Was it certain? Was it even foreseeable? Or did it only happen because Jordan Neely is a lifelong drug addict with the seriously compromised physiology that comes along with those life choices? The prosecutor continues. When Penny did let go, he left Neely on the floor and didn't look back. What's he supposed to do? Pick him up and carry him? He picked up his hat, dusted himself off, and stood over his body. What if he had left the station? You think they would have said that was flight for purposes of escaping accountability? That was consciousness of guilt evidence? What was he supposed to do exactly? Everything you do is wrong. No matter what you choose, in the eye of the prosecutor, it's always going to be the most malicious choice you could have made. It's contemptible. The prosecutor said Penny's defense that he was acting to protect other vulnerable passengers on the train can't be considered beyond the point that the passengers had fled the train. The level of force may have been reasonable initially. Neely's behavior would justify an initial use of force. Oh, would it? Would it? That's a nice concession. But at the point that Penny killed Mr. Neely, is that the evidence? He was alive when he was in Neely's arms. But at the point that Penny killed Mr. Neely, when he was in Penny's arms, but at the point that Penny killed Mr. Neely, there was no one to protect. Well, there was Neely. There was Penny. These names are too similar. Penny still had the privilege to protect himself. There were other people on the car helping him restrain Neely. At that point, there was no excuse or justification for the deadly use of physical force. Well, who says there was a deadly use of physical force? That's not true just because the prosecutor says it. If it was a deadly use of physical force, why was Neely still alive? After Penny no longer had him in his arms. While the state intends to argue that Penny never let up the initial pressure he placed on Neely's neck, how would you prove that? You can't even tell. I mean, if anything, the video I've seen of this restraint is not a choke. And I say that as someone who chokes people with frequency. And I've been choked, am choked with frequency. I do several hours of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a week. We choke each other all the time. I don't see the life-ending pressure on Jordan Neely's neck. The defense insists he made several attempts to loosen his grip and that he only had a light hold on Neely by the time he stopped fighting back. Yes, you can have your arm around someone's neck in a choking position and not be choking them, simply controlling them. And you don't have to tighten up to a choke unless they're violently resisting. The defense said this struggle did last 5 to 6 minutes, but Penny was not and could not have been squeezing his neck. We know that because if he was, Neely would have passed out in the first minute. When you apply a carotid choke, folks, consciousness is lost in 6 to 10 seconds, and it doesn't take a lot of pressure. A few ounces of pressure is all it takes, and the vision just fogs up, and you go night-night. It's that quick, 6 to 10 seconds. Opening statements began on Friday, that's today, after a grueling 2-week process of selecting the 12-person jury. By the way, as an aside, they talk about selecting the jury. This notion of jury selection is nonsense, folks. If I, as a lawyer, got to select the jury, I'd never lose. We don't have the ability to select the jury. We have a modest ability to deselect individual jurors. But we are stuck with the jury the community sends us. I don't get to say, no, these 100 people chosen as prospective jurors, they're in the jury pool. I don't like them. I don't get to say no to people forever until I get the jury that I want. I have a handful of strikes for cause. For cause, of course, a bunch, but a handful of strikes for no cause. So no, the jury's handed to us. We don't select a jury. And of course, if the jury is involved in a politically or racially energized case like this one, they've been exposed to racially hysterical propaganda for maybe a year or more leading up to the trial. They've already developed an opinion on guilt. It turns it into a kangaroo court. They're not listening to any defense. They're not open and impartial and unbiased. It's a lynching jury. An initial search was conducted of Neely's body and jacket, which was nearby. No weapons were found, and only possession he had at the time was a muffin stuffed in his jacket pocket. Police initially felt a faint pulse, and a shot of Narcan was administered because you give Narcan to people who have a pulse. Once the pulse disappeared, by the way, why might it have disappeared after he was no longer being choked? Well, the toxicology is going to come back and show that Jordan Neely was actively on illicit drugs at the time he sought to engage in this behavior, threatening men, women, and children on a subway car. Once the pulse disappeared, officers began performing CPR and then issued another shot of Narcan. At no point did Neely regain consciousness. The defense argued that Penny had only intended to intervene until police could come and take over, which was exactly what he did. Something that took way longer than expected, the defense said, for the police to arrive. From the time the police received the dispatch call, it took 7 minutes for first responders to arrive. I want to point out, folks, that this is on a New York City subway car in the middle of the day in a city that's awash in police officers. I think the New York City Police Department has something like 40,000 police officers, and maybe more now. And it still took them 7 minutes to get there. Now, imagine if you were anywhere and you were being actively attacked by a murderous criminal or a rapist or a kidnapper. What are you going to do? Ask them to wait 7 minutes until the police get there? Or more commonly, 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 minutes? If ever? You are your own first responders, folks. 7 minutes. And then it then took another 10 minutes before emergency services arrived with a defibrillator. The defense said Danny was desperately waiting for police to show up and help him the way he had helped other passengers on this train. The trial is expected to last up to 6 weeks, and will call upon medical experts, first responders, and other passengers who were on the train that day. And I want to mention, did I save it? This Twitter page. Unlimited L's. Let's see if I can focus this in a little bit. By the way, this is a good account. I would encourage you to follow this. It's at unlimited_LS, if it's hard to see there. Basically covers the same information we just did, but it's one of the first places I saw this breaking. Jordan Neely still had a pulse after being put in a chokehold by Marine veteran Daniel Penny. Quote unquote, I got a pulse. That's the police saying that in the video we just watched. The video of Jordan Neely's death was released on Daniel Penny's manslaughter as Daniel Penny's manslaughter began. Why haven't we all seen this video months ago? I wonder why George Soros-funded prosecutor Alvin Bragg did not release this body-worn camera video months ago. You know, when body-worn cameras were first introduced, the people most advocating for them were the people who thought that, man, if we put cameras on these cops, we'll suddenly expose all their wrongdoing. We'll finally be able to nail these ACAB cops. And now that virtually every cop in the country has a body-worn camera, you know what we discover? Overwhelmingly, the evidence captured by that body-worn camera is exculpatory to the police officers. People are learning exactly what these cops have to deal with out in the street. And it's not civilization, folks. All you cop haters out there, I'll get all the bootlicker comments. They'll be coming in. Trust me, they come in all the time. Those cops are what's standing in between you, or if you think you're a tough guy, you don't need cops. They're standing in between your wife, your mother, your children, your daughters, and the animals out there on the street. Because you're not around your wife and your mother and your daughters every moment of the day, are you? You want to take down Jordan Neely? Someone so dirty, the cops didn't even want to touch him? Bodycam footage from the scene shows officers arriving at 2:33 p.m., the middle of the afternoon. This is like roughly when my kids get out of school. And detecting a pulse on Neely. Officers confirm with statements like, I got a pulse. Police attempted CPR, administered Narcan. Paramedics arrived. Neely remained on the train until 3:13. Neely was later pronounced dead at the hospital. NYPD sergeant testified none of his team performed mouth-to-mouth on Neely because he was a drug user. He seemed like a drug user. He was an apparent drug user. He was very dirty. I didn't want them to get ... hepatitis. You know what I think the ... is now? I don't think it's a cover for profanity. I think he was thinking, I don't want my guys to get AIDS. But of course, AIDS is a politicized disease, right? So instead he's like, I'm not going to say that. I'll say hepatitis, which is terrible in its own right and unbelievably infectious, by the way. Hepatitis is far more infectious than AIDS is. You put a couple drops of hepatitis in a swimming pool, everyone who goes in that pool gets hepatitis. That's how infectious hepatitis is. If he did wake up, he would have been vomiting. I didn't want my officers to do that. Well, thank you, Sergeant. Sincerely. All right, so there we are, folks. Let me see if there's any comments. I'll take a look at the law of self-defense members first. And then people wonder, right? They see some woman getting slapped around in public and they say, no one intervened. Nobody helped. Nobody stepped in. I can't believe it. You can't believe it. Are you kidding me? Daniel Penny happens to be single. I'm a guy who habitually goes around armed. Have my entire adult life. I got a wife and 4 children. I can't go to jail for the rest of my life because I tried to help somebody out, and Alvin Bragg decided to put me in Rikers Island for the next several decades. I can't take that risk. You're asking people to help out in an environment in which the people who help out get crucified. It's insane. We don't live in a high-trust society where people know that you're trying to do the right thing. They will characterize you as a racist murderer, like they're doing to Daniel Penny, like they tried to do to George Zimmerman, like they tried to do to Kyle Rittenhouse, even though everyone that Kyle Rittenhouse dealt with was a white dude. And you could get convicted. The risk of conviction is never zero. You could be the most innocent defendant on the face of the planet. There's at least a 10% chance you get convicted, and a lot of criminal defense attorneys will tell you it's more like 50%. I'm not telling anyone to help people or not help people. I don't tell people what to do. You make your own decisions. But the notion that someone's a horrible person for not risking the rest of their lives not in Rikers Island to come to the defense of a stranger, they're just acting rationally, folks. You think if Daniel Penny had to make that decision today, he'd do the same thing? Or you think he'd just kind of take a step back, let everybody else deal with their own problems with Jordan Neely? Derek Chauvin's another one, completely wrongfully convicted. Derek Chauvin wasn't a racist monster. He was, in fact, a hero in his community, 20 years protecting his community. He did absolutely nothing wrong. George Floyd died because George Floyd had a 3-time fatal dose of fentanyl in the system, swallowed a handful of meth pills he had just bought from his drug dealer 30 feet away when he saw police approaching his vehicle, and he didn't want to get nailed with drugs again. He had massive coronary disease, metabolic disease, and decided to physically fight 4 cops against lawful arrest for 10 minutes. You know who killed George Floyd? George Floyd killed George Floyd. Eric Gardner killed Eric Gardner. Michael Brown killed Michael Brown. Trayvon Martin killed Trayvon Martin. And we attempt to crucify the people who defended themselves against these people. All right, let's take a look. I even started on time. Folks are saying, is there a video? Yes. I think I was within a minute of starting on time. Have I completed my move to Tennessee yet? No, I'm still in Colorado. We're aiming for before the next school year, so before next fall. I can't wait to get out. I can't wait. Of course, if Kamala gets elected, I guess it doesn't matter where I live. It's all over at that point. Then it's all done. Let's see. By the way, for those who are interested, I've been invited to be on an election night stream with Ron Coleman, attorney Ron Coleman, and Kurt Schlichter, attorney Kurt Schlichter, and Army Colonel, former Army Colonel, both good friends of mine. I don't think it's a special invitation. I think they're inviting a whole bunch of people. But if you're interested in seeing where I'm at election night, where we can either cheer or cry together, it'll if I'm anywhere online, it'll be with Ron Coleman and Kurt Schlichter. So I don't know, just keep your eyes open. I don't have a link or anything to share. Let's see. 90 IQ juries. You know, one of the jurors who was in the jury pool for selection, the defense attorneys asked her, we've all heard this cliche, right? They said, listen, would you be willing to let 10 guilty people go free to prevent one innocent person from being convicted? And the juror looked back at them and said, I don't understand the question. Those are the jurors, folks. That's why there's always a chance of getting convicted, no matter how innocent you really are. People say, well, I'd rather be, tried by 12 than carried by 6. I'm like, of course, no one wants to be carried by 6, but have you met the 12? Have you met them? Oh, that's why I tell people don't get into fights you don't need to get into. And frankly, you could understand why people would have pause before intervening in these kinds of confrontations. Let's see. Yeah, get ready for this. The cops are racist. They found the racist pulse. like those cops have any. And by the way, it's typical near when NYPD shows up, you see people of every race and every gender. I mean, that's just the nature of the New York Police Department. It reflects the city. Like they have any interest in protecting a killer. The Asian guy is going to find a pulse to protect Daniel Penny. I mean, that makes perfect sense. The black guy who was there, he found a pulse. He found a pulse to protect Daniel Penny. By the way, here in Colorado, my still home state of Colorado, they made it absolutely illegal for any police officer to use any kind of choke. Respiratory, which is understandable, that should never be allowed. But carotid choke, police just can't use a carotid choke, no matter what. Not even as if they're facing a deadly force threat. I could, you could, any non-law enforcement officer could, but it's a crime for a police officer to do it. Yeah, Kurt Schlichter, someone mentioned best action novels ever. Kurt writes great books, and a lot of them are action novels, often themed along like post-apocalyptical. Hillary's been elected president. I think the first couple of his books had that theme to them. It's great stuff. So check him out on Amazon. Kurt Schlichter. If I try to spell it, I'll probably screw it up. SCHLICHTER, I think. I have all his books, but they're in a different room now that we moved out of the office. Overlord is one of his books. Overlord. Another one is The Attack. So use those titles and you'll find his books. Shane put it in the comments on YouTube. So look, that's correct spelling. Yep. All right, so let me take a look at the YouTube comments. Oh, I almost forgot to mention. We have coming up, folks. We have coming up our Law of Self-Defense Hard to Convict webinar. This is a webinar we do a couple times a year. It's absolutely free. It doesn't cost a penny. It's an hour and a half, maybe. And in that hour and a half, we share with you how to be hard to convict if you're ever compelled to use force in defense of yourself, your family, or your property, even defense of others. We cover that too. You have to win the physical fight. That's the most important thing, but you also want to be well positioned to win the legal fight as well. And we cover all of that in this 100% free class, our Hard to Convict webinar. Now it's free, but we do limit the seats because it is live. I live stream it just like this, if you're watching this live. And so we limit the number of seats so we can have effective Q&A with all the attendees. So eventually the seats are gone. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to sign up. It's Saturday, December 7th. So there is time, but I don't know how many seats are left. Grab your seat now before they're all gone at lawofselfdefense.com/hard to convict, or scan that QR code there with your phone. Let's see if we have comments here. Very popular class, by the way. One of my favorites too. It's fun to do. Texas Longhorn says the legal issue will be the definition of lethal force. Read the choke. What type of choke? Blood, air. So what are the legal issues? The legal issues are how much force was Daniel Penny actually using? Because a properly applied carotid choke is not lethal. I've done it to many people. I've had it done to me many times. I'm still here. I'm not dead. None of the people I applied it to are dead. Now, of course, consciousness is lost in like 6 to 10 seconds. And you need to release the pressure at that point. If you maintain pressure for 30 seconds, you could cause brain damage. For a minute, you could kill the person. So it can kill. There's no question about that. But it's almost like discussing the use of an impact weapon, like a baton for self-defense. Are there ways to use a baton that are non-deadly force? Yes. If you're whacking someone in the thigh with a baton, you're not likely to cause death or serious bodily injury. That same baton blow to the head would be deadly force, likely to cause death or serious bodily injury. So it depends on the manner of use of the baton. Well, it depends on the manner of use of the choke. A choke can be lethal, but it's not necessarily lethal. To a healthy person, that's another factor. So say you apply the choke in the way you've been trained. And I talk about this with my fellow BJJ students and my coach. I caution them to be careful, because the way we apply chokes to each other, we're all healthy people in a gym, rolling and doing BJJ. But that same joke applied to a healthy person with no foreseeable risk of death, if you apply it to someone who's a drug addict, a severely compromised physiology, and of course you can't see any of this, you can't see their physiology, you can't see their heart disease, their metabolic disease, the drugs they're on. You don't know any of that if you have to defend yourself. You put a choke on that person, and sometimes they turn off. And I've worked cases. I've been a legal consultant on choke cases where someone trained in BJJ put a cross-collar choke on someone, and that person never woke up. And there was zero evidence that the choke was excessive. None. But I'm absolutely convinced that if it's a homeless person, drug addict, lifelong alcoholic, compromised physiology, some of these people, you put a normal choke on it that should have no foreseeable risk of death, they just die. Is it because of the choke, or is it because of their physiology? If you poke someone in the chest with your finger and they drop over dead of a heart attack, is that manslaughter? Was that foreseeable? So those are some of the issues. Of course, the defense will say, well, look, whatever force he used was lawful. It was in lawful self-defense. To the extent you could characterize a properly applied carotid choke as deadly force, even from the first moment, well, Jordan Neely was threatening people with death. But in fact, our client never applied deadly force. He used the minimum amount of force necessary to control this person until police could arrive. And that's justified. And if it's justified and reasonable, it's not reckless. And if it's not reckless, it's not reckless manslaughter. And it's not criminally negligent homicide. Someone says they knew about the pulse issue from when this first happened. Yeah, I heard about it, but there was no evidence. And I try to restrain my commentary because people just make stuff up, right? I try to restrain my commentary to a discussion of the law as we can apply it to the evidence, the credible evidence we actually have in hand or can reasonably infer. Let's see. How did this ever go to trial? Because you have a George Soros prosecutor in an urban setting. That's it. He saw political advantage to bringing Daniel Penny to trial. It's an elected position. Is Alvin Bragg not going to get elected because he prosecuted Daniel Penny? Or is he going to be able to go out to his constituents and say, well, I prosecuted that white guy who killed our brother, our Michael Jackson imitator, talented member of our community. I prosecuted him. Maybe I got him convicted. Who knows? We don't know yet. Even if he didn't get him convicted, he gets to go back and gain political capital by saying, I fought for you. It could have been you who Daniel Penny killed in a subway car. It's a win-win for the prosecutors to bring these politically charged cases. Someone says you aren't required to give rescue breaths when doing CPR. You're not required to do anything. The CPR is cardiopulmonary resurrection, right? Resuscitation. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The pulmonary is the breathing part. Of course, you can skip it, but then I guess it's not CPR. It's just CR. Of course, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And you certainly would not do CPR on a breathing person, right? That would be awkward. And you might actually stop their breathing. Let's see what else. Hey everybody! I know it's been a while. I've been doing a lot of pre-recorded content. We're working with a new production team. I'm very pleased with them. We're seeing great results, but the focus is on pre-recording stuff and then sending it to them for post-production work. And I don't know. You guys can tell me if you like the product. But we're seeing some real movement in terms of kind of social media traction, for the first time in years. So it's I'm very pleased. But it is a different type of effort here, and it's a lot more work for me than just live streaming, that's for sure. But hopefully it's worth it. Watch this. As Branca is smart, but he's definitely a Kamala voter. Does Branca still talk to Nick Rekieta? I mean, I guess the answer is kind of yes or no. I mean, Nick and I never talked that often before. I mean, unless I was on one of his streams. I'm not a guy who chats on the phone a lot with people, just conversationally. But I'm happy to talk to Nick anytime. I guess I talked to him a couple months ago. And Nick knows if there's anything I can do to, help him and his family achieve the most positive outcome available to him, I'm happy to do that. So I know it's popular right now in the LawTube community to just, keep kicking Nick in the face, and that's fine. People are entitled to produce whatever content they want. If that's working for them, that's just not what I do. So yeah, I'll still talk to Nick. Sure, if he called me up right now, I'd answer the phone. And that's not apologizing for anything Nick's done wrong. Nick's going to be held accountable. He's being held accountable for life choices, and here we are. How would you feel if you didn't have breakfast this morning? Yep, that's what these drawers are like. But what do you mean? I did have breakfast. Bench trials are sometimes a good choice. Sometimes, but then you're at the mercy of the judge. And you never really know if the judge is politicized. A lot of them are. You think George Zimmerman would have gotten acquitted if he had a bench trial in front of Deborah, what the heck was her last name? That judge who ruled against him on everything. And every time they appealed, the defense appealed it to the Florida appellate courts. The Florida appellate courts overruled the trial judge. Deborah Nelson, that was her name. Yeah, on the other hand, when we had the Baltimore prosecutions for the guy who broke his neck in the police van. I cover so many of these cases, it's hard to keep it straight. Those cops, they did nothing wrong. There was zero evidence that they did anything wrong, and they were prosecuted for crimes as serious as murder. And they were a mixed bag in terms of race and gender. There were white guys, black guys, women, men being prosecuted. The judge was a black guy, and they opted for bench trials, and they all got acquitted. Everyone that went to trial got acquitted, and then the prosecution gave up. Hey, Excited Utterance, how you doing? Nice to see you. It's Saturday. It's not Saturday. It's only Saturday in the make-believe land that doesn't exist. It is currently Friday. Thank you very much. Let's see. Freddie Gray was the Baltimore broken neck case. Yeah, I covered that one in detail, all those trials. It was a travesty. Who is the prosecutor? I think she's in federal prison right now. What was her name? It sounded something like Maria Carey. It wasn't Maria Carey, but it was a young black woman who just decided to prosecute these guys, and for reasons I could go into, but we'd have to spend another hour together. But later during COVID, she lied about some COVID funding or home mortgages or something. I forget what it was. And she must have been really unpopular because they actually went after her and prosecuted her and convicted her. Why is Daniel Penny's trial not being televised? New York State simply, as a default matter, trial courts do not televise. Some of their appellate courts do broadcast, but the trial courts just don't televise in New York. Marilyn Mosby, that was her. Oh, what a horrible human being. What a horrible human being. There was zero evidence that those cops in Baltimore had done anything wrong, laid a wrongful finger on Freddie Gray. And she tried to put him in prison for, again, charges as serious as murder. It's crazy. And then they tried to sue her afterwards, but prosecutors have effectively absolute immunity. So there was nothing they could do, even though she blatantly lied. She said She said she ran an independent investigation that provided her with probable cause to indict these people and bring them to trial. And then later, the civil suits start and they go to her investigator in her office who supposedly did this investigation. And he's like, I don't know what she's talking about. I didn't investigate anything. She just made it up. Hey, uncivil law. Oh, I guess maybe YouTube's splashing me around on the live stream stuff, notifying people. That would be a nice change. Yeah, YouTube's going good. I mean, we're not really a YouTube business. Our business is legal consulting and classes and books and stuff like that. And we consider YouTube to be kind of a marketing avenue for us. Yeah, I think we went from like, I don't know, 60 to 70,000 subscribers in the last couple of weeks. So that was an abrupt change in the rate of accumulation of subscribers. So to those of you who are new, welcome. I'm very pleased to have you here. It's great. It's great. Yeah, I don't trust YouTube because I've just seen YouTube just, on a whim. Wait till Kamala gets reelected and Elon Musk has Twitter taken away from him. And we're back to the old days where if you say the wrong word, you say like a COVID word, suddenly your channel's gone. You start accumulating strikes. We're in a, we could be in a brief period of freedom here. We'll see. We'll know within a few, well, I don't know. Shortly. Yeah, so we don't trust YouTube. I don't trust them. But as long as they let me be here, I'll be here and I'll just spread my message on YouTube as well. We have, by the way, in all frankness, begun delaying our output to YouTube. So we're providing our pre-produced content to our members first, and then a day or two later, it goes on to YouTube. So if you'd like earlier access to our stuff, every YouTube show, there's a link. Membership's 99 cents. It's just not that much money. So, all right, folks, let's see. Any more member comments? Yeah, the fun part of I prefer doing the live shows. It's way easier for me. This is way more fun for me than looking into a teleprompter. But we've been doing it this way for years and haven't seen much movement. So we're trying something new. I do plan. So when we have a high profile event like this, I'll just go live like I did here. I am trying to figure out I would like to do a live show just for our law self-defense members, like once a week, like Friday afternoon. The trouble is I travel a lot, so it's hard to schedule, but that's one of our goals. Just once a week, just all get together, talk about whatever's in the news and whatever we want to chat about and tell some jokes and maybe have a couple drinks and just have fun. But I'm not going to put that on YouTube. That'll just be for members. Let's see. I love the live stuff. For me, the live stuff is effortless. The pre-production stuff is like, oh, I got to write stuff down. I got to prepare slides. It's a lot of work. It's 3 times as much work as doing it live. Live is easy. All right, folks, we're bumping up against an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Daniel Penny, I'm sorry this is happening to you. Don't forget about our Hard to Convict webinar coming up on December 7th. It's free. It's free, but we do limit the number of seats, so I have a chance to talk with everybody. lawselfdefense.com, Hard to Convict, or scan that QR code. Let's hope things end well for Daniel Penny. Let's hope that this week is not the last week of America as we know it. And good wishes to all of you. Again, election night, I'll be hanging out with Ron Coleman and Kurt Schlichter, wherever they are in the internet. I'm sure it'll be YouTube. Just find Ron Coleman's channel. That's where it is. I won't be doing an independent stream. I'll just be hanging out with other people. All right, folks. So I'll just remind all of you that if you carry a gun, so you're hard to kill, that's why I carry a gun. So I'm hard to kill, so my family is hard to kill. Then you also owe it to yourself and your family to make sure you know the law. You know the law, so you're hard to convict as well. Until next time, I remain attorney Andrew Branca for the Law of Self-Defense. Stay safe.